There are places in this world where history refuses to follow the rules. California, known today for tech, fame, and coastline, was once home to stories far stranger than science can comfortably explain. Tales of ancient ships stranded in deserts, mysterious cave paintings that resemble constellations and spacecraft, and mountains whispered to conceal entire lost civilizations. These aren't modern inventions or fringe theories. They're real accounts, artifacts, and legends that continue to baffle archaeologists, historians, and scientists to this day. Tonight we're uncovering ancient mysteries buried deep beneath the Golden State's surface, secrets that challenge what we think we know about North America's past, and hint at a forgotten world far older than we've been taught. Before we begin, just a quick note. The visuals in this video aren't necessary to follow the stories. They help bring them to life, but you can listen entirely through audio. So feel free to let this play in the background as you work, unwind, or even drift off to sleep. And if you enjoy this journey into the unexplained, consider subscribing to support more long-form content like this. Now, let's dive into California's unsolved ancient mysteries, the ones science still can't explain. Deep in the California desert, something waits that shouldn't exist. Hidden inside an ancient rock formation, encased for what scientists estimate could be 500,000 years, lies an object that looks disturbingly familiar. It resembles a modern spark plug, complete with metal components and ceramic insulation. But here's the problem that keeps archaeologists awake at night: spark plugs weren't invented until 1903. So what exactly is buried in the rocks of the Coso Mountains, and how did it get there? The story begins on February 13, 1961, when 3 rock hunters were searching for geodes in the rugged terrain near Olentia, California. Wallace Lane, Virginia Maxey, and Mike Mikesell were experienced collectors, used to cracking open ordinary-looking rocks to reveal beautiful crystal formations inside. They had spent the morning gathering specimens from what appeared to be a dried-up lake bed, surrounded by the stark beauty of the Coso mountain range. But when they returned home and Mike Mikesell began cutting through one of their finds with a diamond saw, something unexpected happened. As the blade sliced through what should have been solid rock, it hit something hard, something metallic. The saw blade, designed to cut through the toughest minerals, was damaged. When they examined the rock more closely, they discovered something that would puzzle scientists for decades to come. Inside the geode-like rock formation was what appeared to be a manufactured object. At its center was a 2-millimeter thick hexagonal rod made of bright metal, possibly copper. This rod was surrounded by what looked like ceramic material, and the entire assembly was encased in a hard, mineralized shell. Most disturbing of all, the object bore an uncanny resemblance to a modern automobile spark plug. The 3 rock hunters knew they had found something unusual, but they couldn't have imagined the controversy their discovery would spark. Word of the strange artifact spread through the local community, and soon it caught the attention of researchers and scientists. Some dismissed it immediately as a hoax or a case of mistaken identity. Others, however, were intrigued by the possibility that this could be evidence of something far more significant. The initial examinations were promising but limited. X-ray analysis revealed the internal structure of the object, confirming that it contained what appeared to be manufactured components. The metal rod at its center was clearly artificial, and the ceramic-like material surrounding it bore similarities to modern electrical insulators. But perhaps most compelling was the rock formation itself. Geologists who examined the encasing material determined that it was not actually a geode, as originally thought, but rather a type of concretion, a hard, compact mass of mineral matter formed over thousands of years. The process that creates these formations typically takes enormous amounts of time, during which layers of sediment slowly accumulate and harden around a central object. If the Coso artifact was indeed encased naturally, it would suggest that the object had been sitting in place for an incredibly long time. But how long exactly? This is where the mystery deepens and the controversy begins. Initial estimates suggested that the concretion could be anywhere from several thousand to several 100,000 years old. Some researchers, examining the mineral composition and the geological context of the find site, proposed that the artifact could be as much as 500,000 years old. If true, this would place its creation far before the emergence of modern humans, let alone the development of electrical technology. The implications of such a dating would be staggering. It would mean that either our understanding of human history is fundamentally flawed, or that the object has a non-human origin. Some researchers have suggested that the Coso artifact could be evidence of a lost advanced civilization, one that possessed technological capabilities far beyond what we previously believed possible for ancient peoples. Others have proposed even more exotic explanations, including the possibility of time travel or extraterrestrial visitation. However, skeptics have raised numerous questions about both the artifact and its supposed age. The most obvious criticism is that the object looks remarkably similar to early 20th century spark plugs, particularly those manufactured by the Champion Spark Plug Company in the 1920s. Could the Coso artifact simply be a lost or discarded automotive part that became encased in mineral deposits over a much shorter period of time? This explanation might seem reasonable, but it faces its own set of problems. The area where the artifact was found is remote and was largely inaccessible to automobiles in the early 20th century. Furthermore, the mineral encasement appears to be quite thick and well-formed, suggesting a longer formation period than just a few decades. Some geologists have argued that certain environmental conditions could accelerate the concretion process, but others maintain that the formation would still require centuries or millennia to achieve the observed thickness and hardness. Adding to the mystery is the fact that the original artifact has largely disappeared from scientific scrutiny. After the initial discovery and examination, the Coso artifact was returned to its finders, and its current whereabouts are unknown. Wallace Lane, one of the original discoverers, claimed to have kept the artifact, but attempts by researchers to re-examine it have been unsuccessful. This has led some to question whether the artifact ever existed at all, while others suggest that it may have been deliberately hidden to avoid further controversy. The lack of access to the original specimen has made it impossible to conduct more sophisticated modern analyses that might resolve some of the questions surrounding its age and origin. Techniques such as carbon dating, advanced spectroscopic analysis, and detailed mineralogical examination could potentially provide definitive answers about the artifact's true nature. Without these tests, the Coso artifact remains trapped in a state of scientific limbo. Despite the absence of the original artifact, the story has continued to evolve. Photographs and X-rays taken during the initial examination have been analyzed and reanalyzed by researchers over the decades. Some have pointed to details in these images that they claim support the artifact's authenticity and ancient origin. Others have identified features that they argue are consistent with 20th century manufacturing techniques. One of the most intriguing aspects of the case is the geological context of the discovery site. The Coso Mountains are known for their unique geological history, including ancient volcanic activity and the presence of obsidian deposits that were valued by Native American peoples for tool making. The area has also been the subject of various archaeological investigations, though none have uncovered evidence of advanced technological civilizations. Some researchers have suggested that the Coso region might hold other secrets waiting to be discovered. They point to reports of unusual rock formations, strange mineral deposits, and other anomalous findings in the area. Could the Coso artifact be just one piece of a larger puzzle, evidence of something extraordinary that occurred in this remote corner of California long ago? The story has also attracted attention from those interested in what are sometimes called out-of-place artifacts, or OOPArts, objects that appear to be inconsistent with the established archaeological or geological record. The Coso Artifact has joined a controversial collection of such items, including things like the Antikythera mechanism, the Baghdad battery, and various allegedly ancient tools and devices that seem to demonstrate technological knowledge beyond what conventional history would predict. Critics argue that most OOParts can be explained through conventional means, misidentification, hoaxes, or simple misunderstanding of the archaeological context. They point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the Coso Artifact, despite its intriguing appearance, has not provided the kind of rigorous scientific documentation that would be needed to overturn our understanding of technological development. But supporters of the artifact's authenticity argue that dismissing such anomalies too quickly could cause us to miss important clues about our past. They suggest that the scientific establishment has a tendency to reject evidence that doesn't fit established paradigms, even when that evidence might point toward remarkable discoveries about ancient capabilities or unknown aspects of human history. The debate over the Coso Artifact also raises broader questions about how we interpret archaeological and geological evidence. How do we distinguish between genuine anomalies that might reveal new truths about the past and apparent mysteries that turn out to have mundane explanations? What level of evidence is required to justify reconsidering established timelines and theories? These questions become particularly relevant when we consider the vast spans of time involved in human history and geological processes. 500,000 years ago, the world was a very different place. The landscape of California bore little resemblance to what we see today, and the climate and environmental conditions would have been dramatically different. If some unknown civilization or phenomenon did leave traces during this ancient period, how might we recognize and interpret such evidence today? The Coso Artifact continues to fascinate researchers and amateur investigators alike, not just because of what it might represent, but because of what it reveals about the mysteries that still surround us. Even in our modern age of advanced scientific techniques and global communication, there are still discoveries waiting to be made, still questions that remain unanswered about our world and our history. Whether the Coso Artifact is genuine evidence of ancient technology, a misidentified modern object, or something else entirely, it serves as a reminder that our understanding of the past is still incomplete. In the remote mountains and deserts of California, as in countless other locations around the world, there may be secrets waiting to be uncovered, mysteries that could change how we think about human history and our place in the cosmos. The story of the Coso Artifact remains unresolved, a puzzle encased not just in rock, but in the accumulated questions and debates of more than 6 decades. Until the original artifact can be relocated and subjected to modern scientific analysis, or until similar discoveries provide additional evidence, the mystery will endure, challenging us to keep an open mind about the possibility that our ancestors, or perhaps someone else entirely, possessed capabilities that we have yet to fully understand. In the sun-baked desert of San Bernardino County, California, lies a site that has sparked one of the most heated debates in American archaeology. For more than 5 decades, the Calico Early Man Site has divided the scientific community, with some researchers claiming it contains evidence of human habitation dating back 200,000 years or more. If true, this would completely rewrite our understanding of when humans first arrived in the Americas. But the evidence is far from clear, and the controversy continues to this day. The story begins in 1958, when amateur archaeologist Ruth DeEtte Simpson was exploring the area around Yermo, California. Simpson was searching for evidence of early human presence in the Mojave Desert, following up on reports of unusual stone formations and possible artifacts. What she found in the alluvial fan deposits near Calico Mountains would launch decades of excavation, research, and fierce scientific debate. Simpson discovered what appeared to be stone tools, primitive implements that seemed to show evidence of human modification. The stones were found in geological layers that appeared to be extremely old, potentially dating back to the Pleistocene epoch. This was significant because the accepted timeline for human arrival in the Americas placed the first inhabitants at no more than 15 to 20,000 years ago, arriving via the Bering Land Bridge during the last ice age. Word of Simpson's discoveries eventually reached Dr. Louis Leakey, one of the most famous archaeologists of the 20th century. Leakey was known for his groundbreaking work in Africa, where he had discovered some of the earliest human fossils and had helped establish the African origins of human evolution. His involvement in the Calico project would bring both credibility and controversy to the site. Leakey visited Calico in 1963 and was immediately intrigued by what he saw. The stone implements appeared to show signs of deliberate modification, evidence of knapping, the process by which early humans shaped stones into tools by striking them with other rocks. Leakey agreed to support further excavations at the site, and formal archaeological work began in 1964. The excavations at Calico were extensive and methodical. Archaeologists carefully mapped and cataloged thousands of stone specimens, documenting their precise locations within the geological layers. The site was divided into careful grids, and every potential artifact was photographed, measured, and analyzed. The work continued for decades, producing a massive collection of material that supporters claimed represented one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in North America. The key evidence at Calico consists of what researchers call lithic implements, stones that appear to have been intentionally modified by human hands. These implements range from simple flakes that might have been used as cutting tools to more complex forms that could have served various functions. The most compelling specimen show what archaeologists call bulbs of percussion, characteristic features that form when one stone is struck against another in the tool-making process. But the age of these potential artifacts is what makes the Calico site so controversial. The stone implements were found in geological layers that have been dated using various methods, including analysis of the surrounding sediments, volcanic ash deposits, and the overall geological context of the site. These dating methods suggest that some of the deepest layers containing potential artifacts could be between 100,000 and 200,000 years old, or possibly even older. Such an ancient date for human presence in the Americas would be revolutionary. It would mean that early humans or their ancestors reached North America far earlier than previously thought, possibly during much warmer climatic periods when sea levels and migration routes would have been very different from those that existed during the last ice age. It would also raise questions about which human species might have been responsible for creating these tools, as modern humans were only beginning to emerge in Africa during this time period. The implications extend beyond just the timing of human arrival in the Americas. If the Calico evidence is genuine, it could suggest that early human migration patterns were far more complex and occurred much earlier than our current models predict. It might mean that multiple waves of human migration occurred over hundreds of thousands of years, rather than the single major migration event that most archaeologists currently favor. However, the scientific community has been largely skeptical of the Calico claims. Critics argue that the supposed stone tools could be the result of natural geological processes rather than human modification. When rocks are subjected to natural forces like erosion, freeze-thaw cycles, or pressure from overlying sediments, they can fracture in ways that sometimes mimic the patterns created by human tool-making. This phenomenon, known as pseudo-artifacts, is a well-recognized problem in archaeology. Natural processes can create stones that look remarkably similar to human-made tools, complete with sharp edges, flake scars, and even features that resemble bulbs of percussion. Distinguishing between genuine artifacts and pseudo-artifacts requires careful analysis and often remains a matter of scientific judgment. The debate over Calico has been complicated by the site's geological setting. The area has experienced significant tectonic activity over millions of years, including earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and dramatic changes in climate and erosion patterns. These forces could potentially create conditions where rocks are naturally fractured and shaped in ways that might be mistaken for human modification. Critics have also pointed out that despite decades of excavation and the recovery of thousands of stone specimens, no other types of archaeological evidence have been found at Calico. There are no hearths, no bone tools, no clear living surfaces, and no organic remains that might be associated with human habitation. In most archaeological sites where genuine early human artifacts are found, these tools are typically associated with other evidence of human activity. The absence of such supporting evidence has led many archaeologists to conclude that the Calico specimens are more likely to be natural formations rather than human artifacts. They argue that if early humans were present at the site for extended periods, as would be necessary to create the quantity of supposed tools that have been found, there should be additional traces of their presence. Supporters of the Calico hypothesis, however, maintain that the evidence for human modification of the stones is compelling. They point to detailed analysis of the fracture patterns, the consistent orientation of certain features, and the apparent selection of specific types of stone as evidence that human intelligence was involved in creating these implements. They also argue that the preservation conditions at the site might not favor the survival of organic materials or other types of archaeological evidence. The debate has been further complicated by the involvement of both professional archaeologists and amateur researchers. While Louis Leakey's support lent credibility to the project, some critics have suggested that his involvement may have influenced the interpretation of the evidence in ways that weren't entirely objective. The fact that much of the excavation work was carried out by volunteers and amateur archaeologists has also raised questions about the consistency and reliability of the fieldwork methods. Over the years, various attempts have been made to resolve the Calico controversy through additional analysis and research. New dating methods have been applied to the site's geological layers. Advanced microscopic techniques have been used to examine the supposed tool surfaces, and statistical analyses have been conducted to determine whether the patterns of stone modification could have occurred naturally. Some of these studies have provided additional support for the natural formation hypothesis, suggesting that the fracture patterns observed at Calico are consistent with what would be expected from geological processes. Others have found features that seem more difficult to explain through natural means alone, keeping the debate alive. The controversy has also been influenced by broader changes in our understanding of early human migration and North American prehistory. In recent decades, new archaeological sites have pushed back the accepted timeline for human arrival in the Americas, though not nearly as far as the Calico claims would suggest. Sites like Monte Verde in Chile and others have provided evidence for human presence dating back 15 to 20,000 years, and possibly somewhat earlier. These discoveries have made the archaeological community more open to the possibility that humans arrived in the Americas earlier than previously thought, but they have also highlighted the importance of rigorous evidence and careful analysis. The fact that these other early sites contain clear evidence of human habitation, including organic remains, hearths, and unambiguous artifacts, makes the absence of such evidence at Calico more significant. The Calico debate also reflects broader issues in archaeology about how we evaluate unusual or controversial claims. The site represents a case where extraordinary claims about human antiquity in the Americas have been made based on evidence that many experts find ambiguous at best. This raises questions about the standards of evidence that should be required for accepting major revisions to our understanding of prehistory. Some researchers have argued that the scientific community has been too quick to dismiss the Calico evidence, suggesting that bias against unconventional ideas may have prevented proper consideration of the site's potential significance. They contend that the evidence deserves more serious study and that new analytical techniques might provide clearer answers about the nature of the stone specimens. Others maintain that the burden of proof for such extraordinary claims must be correspondingly high, and that the Calico evidence simply doesn't meet the standards that would be required to overturn decades of established archaeological knowledge. They argue that accepting the Calico claims without more compelling evidence would set a dangerous precedent for archaeological interpretation. The site continues to be studied and debated, though with less intensity than in previous decades. Modern archaeological techniques, including advanced dating methods, microscopic analysis, and computer modeling, continue to be applied to the Calico material. Some researchers remain hopeful that new approaches might finally resolve the controversy one way or another. Meanwhile, the broader search for evidence of early human presence in the Americas continues at other sites across the continent. Each new discovery adds to our understanding of how and when humans first arrived in the New World, even if none have provided evidence as ancient as what is claimed for Calico. The Calico Early Man Site remains one of the most controversial archaeological sites in North America, a place where the boundaries between scientific evidence and interpretation continue to be tested. Whether the stones found there represent genuine artifacts from an incredibly ancient human presence or simply the products of natural geological processes, the site has played an important role in pushing archaeologists to carefully examine their assumptions about the past. In the end, the Calico controversy serves as a reminder of how much we still don't know about human history and the challenges involved in interpreting evidence from the distant past. In the harsh beauty of the Mojave Desert, where wind and time have sculpted the landscape for millions of years, the question remains: did early humans once walk these ancient shores, leaving behind stone tools as evidence of their presence? Or are we seeing patterns in the rocks that exist only in our imagination, the product of our desire to find human traces in the deep past? The answer may never be definitively known, but the search for understanding continues, driven by the fundamental human desire to know where we came from and how long we have called this continent home. Off the coast of Southern California, 22 miles from the mainland, lies Santa Catalina Island. To most visitors, it's a peaceful getaway known for its crystal-clear waters, charming town of Avalon, and abundant wildlife. But beneath this idyllic surface lies one of the most controversial archaeological mysteries in North America. For over a century, whispers have circulated about discoveries that challenge everything we think we know about the ancient inhabitants of California. These aren't just stories or local legends. These are documented accounts of skeletal remains that shouldn't exist according to our current understanding of human history. The mystery begins in the early 1900s, when amateur archaeologists and curious islanders began exploring the numerous caves that dot Catalina's rugged coastline. What they found would spark debates that continue to this day. Deep within these limestone caverns, protected from the elements for potentially thousands of years, lay human remains of extraordinary size. We're not talking about people who were simply tall by ancient standards. These were skeletal remains measuring between 7 and 9 feet in height, with some reports claiming even larger specimens. The first documented discovery occurred in 1919, when Ralph Glidden, a mining engineer turned amateur archaeologist, began systematic excavations on the island. Glidden wasn't just a treasure hunter looking for artifacts to sell. He was methodical, documenting his finds and attempting to piece together the story of Catalina's ancient inhabitants. What he uncovered would become the foundation of one of California's most enduring mysteries. Glidden reported finding numerous oversized skeletons, many buried in a sitting position within the island's sea caves. But these weren't isolated finds. Over the course of several years, he documented dozens of these remains, each telling a similar story of a people who stood head and shoulders above the average human of any known historical period. The skeletons showed evidence of advanced age, suggesting these weren't simply exceptionally tall individuals, but rather members of an entire population of giants. But the mystery deepens when we examine the artifacts found alongside these remains. Glidden discovered elaborate burial goods, including carved stone bowls, shell ornaments, and tools that showed remarkable craftsmanship. Some of these artifacts appeared to be made from materials not native to the island, suggesting these ancient people had extensive trade networks or the ability to travel great distances. The burial practices themselves were sophisticated, indicating a complex society with established rituals and beliefs about death and the afterlife. One of the most intriguing aspects of Glidden's discoveries was the condition of the skeletons. Despite their age, many were remarkably well preserved, protected by the cool, dry environment of the sea caves. This preservation allowed for detailed examination of bone structure, revealing features that some researchers found difficult to explain. The skulls, in particular, showed characteristics that didn't easily fit into known categories of human development. Some had enlarged cranial capacities, while others displayed unusual bone thickness and structural features. The teeth told their own story. Many of the giant skeletons had teeth that were significantly larger than those of modern humans, but more importantly, they showed wear patterns consistent with a diet rich in shellfish and marine resources. This made sense given the island location, but it also suggested these people had lived on Catalina for extended periods, developing specialized dietary habits over generations. As word of Glidden's discovery spread, other researchers and amateur archaeologists flocked to Catalina Island. Many reported similar finds, adding to the growing collection of evidence for an ancient race of giants. Some described skeletons reaching heights of up to 9 feet, far beyond the range of normal human variation. These weren't just tall individuals within a normal population, but rather consistent evidence of an entire group of people who defied conventional understanding of human physical development. The mystery took on new dimensions when researchers began to examine the dating of these remains. While precise radiocarbon dating wasn't available in the early 20th century, the burial contexts and associated artifacts suggested these skeletons were ancient, possibly predating known Native American populations in the region by thousands of years. This raised uncomfortable questions about the timeline of human settlement in California and the possibility of multiple waves of prehistoric migration. Local Native American tribes had their own stories about the island's ancient inhabitants. The Tongva people, who had lived in the region for centuries, spoke of a race of giants who once inhabited the Channel Islands. These weren't mythological stories, but rather oral histories passed down through generations. According to these accounts, the giants were not necessarily hostile, but they were different, possessing knowledge and abilities that set them apart from ordinary humans. Some tribal stories describe these giants as skilled seafarers, capable of navigating the treacherous waters between the mainland and the islands with ease. They were said to have built large boats and established settlements throughout the Channel Island chain. Other accounts suggested they had knowledge of astronomy and were capable of predicting seasonal changes and tidal patterns with remarkable accuracy. But here's where the story takes a troubling turn. Despite decades of documented discoveries and growing public interest, many of the giant skeletons from Catalina Island have mysteriously disappeared. Some were reportedly donated to museums, only to vanish from their collections without explanation. Others were said to have been sold to private collectors or simply lost in storage. The Smithsonian Institution, which allegedly received several specimens, claims to have no record of such donations. This disappearance of evidence has fueled conspiracy theories and speculation about cover-ups. Some researchers argue that the existence of giant skeletons challenges established archaeological narratives about human development and migration patterns in North America. They suggest that powerful institutions have deliberately suppressed evidence that doesn't fit conventional theories about prehistoric populations. The controversy isn't limited to the size of the skeletons. Some researchers have pointed to unusual features in the bone structure that they claim indicate non-human characteristics. These include elongated skulls, unusual cranial sutures, and bone density that exceeds normal human parameters. Critics argue that these features can be explained by natural variation, post-mortem changes, or measurement errors, but proponents maintain that the evidence points to something extraordinary. Modern attempts to investigate the Catalina giants have been hampered by the island's protected status and the disappearance of original specimens. Today, Santa Catalina Island is largely owned by the Catalina Island Conservancy, which strictly regulates archaeological activities. While this protection is important for preserving the island's natural and cultural resources, it has also made it difficult for researchers to conduct new investigations that might shed light on the giant mystery. Some contemporary researchers have attempted to locate the original cave sites where Glidden made his discoveries. Using historical records and early photographs, they've identified several potential locations along the island's coastline. However, many of these caves have been altered by natural processes or human activity over the past century, making it difficult to determine their original state or conduct meaningful archaeological work. The few remaining artifacts from the Catalina excavations provide tantalizing clues about the island's ancient inhabitants. Stone tools show evidence of sophisticated knapping techniques, while shell ornaments display intricate carved designs that suggest artistic traditions passed down through generations. Some artifacts appear to have been made from materials that would have required extensive trade networks or long-distance travel to obtain. Recent advances in archaeological science have opened new possibilities for investigating the Catalina mystery. DNA analysis of ancient remains can now provide detailed information about population relationships and migration patterns. Ground-penetrating radar and other remote sensing technologies can identify buried sites without disturbing them. Unfortunately, the lack of preserved skeletal material from the original discoveries makes it impossible to apply these modern techniques to the giant remains themselves. The debate over the Catalina giants reflects broader questions about how we interpret archaeological evidence and construct narratives about the past. Mainstream archaeology tends to be conservative, requiring multiple lines of evidence before accepting claims that challenge established theories. This cautious approach helps prevent the spread of false information, but it can also lead to the dismissal of genuine anomalies that don't fit existing frameworks. Alternative researchers argue that the archaeological establishment is too rigid in its thinking, dismissing evidence that challenges conventional wisdom about human development and prehistoric populations. They point to the Catalina giants as an example of how potentially important discoveries can be marginalized or suppressed when they don't conform to academic expectations. The truth about the Catalina Island giants may never be fully known. Too much evidence has been lost, too many specimens have disappeared, and too much time has passed since the original discoveries. But the mystery continues to fascinate researchers and the public alike, representing one of those tantalizing glimpses into a past that may be far stranger than we imagine. What we do know is that something unusual was discovered in those island caves over a century ago. Whether it was truly a race of giants, an isolated population with unusual physical characteristics, or simply the result of measurement errors and wishful thinking, the Catalina mystery reminds us that our understanding of the past is always incomplete. There are still secrets buried in remote caves and forgotten sites, waiting for the right combination of curiosity, technology, and luck to bring them to light. High in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California, where the air is thin and the silence is broken only by the whisper of wind through ancient pines, lies a collection of rock art that has puzzled researchers for generations. These aren't simple drawings or primitive symbols carved by bored travelers. These are sophisticated astronomical maps, star charts etched into stone by people who possessed a deep understanding of celestial mechanics thousands of years before the invention of modern telescopes. The question that haunts archaeologists and astronomers alike is simple yet profound. How did ancient people, living in what we consider a primitive time, create accurate representations of stellar movements and cosmic events? The Sierra Nevada petroglyphs are scattered across hundreds of square miles of rugged mountain terrain, from the eastern slopes facing the Owens Valley to remote high country basins accessible only by difficult hiking trails. Some sites contain just a few carved symbols, while others feature elaborate panels with hundreds of individual elements. But what makes these carvings truly extraordinary isn't their number or their artistic beauty, though both are impressive. It's their apparent function as astronomical instruments, calendars, and star maps that accurately reflect the movement of celestial bodies across the night sky. The discovery of the astronomical nature of these petroglyphs came about through the work of researchers who combined archaeological investigation with astronomical analysis. In the 1970s and 80s, scientists began to notice that many of the carved symbols aligned with significant astronomical events. Spirals, circles, and radiating lines weren't just decorative elements, but rather precise representations of solar and lunar cycles, seasonal changes, and the movement of stars and planets across the heavens. One of the most significant sites lies in the volcanic tablelands near Bishop, California, where hundreds of petroglyphs cover dark basalt boulders scattered across the high desert landscape. Here, researchers have identified clear representations of solstices and equinoxes, marked by symbols that align perfectly with the rising and setting sun at critical times of the year. But these solar calendars are just the beginning of the astronomical knowledge embedded in the rock art. More complex panels appear to track the movements of individual stars and constellations across the seasonal cycle. The ancient carvers somehow knew that stars visible in the summer sky would be different from those seen in winter, and they created permanent records of these changes carved into stone. Some petroglyphs seem to represent specific star groups that were important for navigation, seasonal timing, or religious purposes. The precision of these astronomical representations is what makes them so mysterious. Creating accurate star maps requires careful observation over extended periods, understanding of mathematical relationships between celestial objects, and the ability to translate three-dimensional movements across the sky into two-dimensional symbols on rock surfaces. This level of astronomical sophistication challenges our assumptions about the capabilities of prehistoric peoples in North America. But the Sierra Nevada petroglyphs go beyond simple star charts. Some panels appear to record rare astronomical events that occur only once in a lifetime or even less frequently. Supernovas, bright stellar explosions visible to the naked eye, may be represented by distinctive star symbols with radiating lines. Comets, with their characteristic tails, seem to be depicted in several locations. Most intriguingly, some researchers believe certain petroglyphs record the positions of planets, tracking their complex movements through the zodiacal constellations. The complexity increases when we consider that many of these astronomical symbols are integrated with representations of animals, human figures, and abstract designs. This suggests that the star knowledge wasn't separate from other aspects of ancient life, but rather formed part of a comprehensive worldview that connected earthly and celestial realms. The petroglyphs may represent not just scientific observations, but also mythological or religious beliefs about the relationship between humans and the cosmos. Dating these astronomical petroglyphs presents significant challenges. Unlike organic materials, rock art cannot be directly radiocarbon dated. Researchers must rely on indirect methods, such as analyzing tool marks, studying patination processes, or examining associated archaeological deposits. Based on these techniques, many of the Sierra Nevada petroglyphs appear to be between 1,000 and 3,000 years old, though some may be significantly older. This age range places their creation during a period when Native American groups in the region were developing increasingly sophisticated cultures. The Paiute, Shoshone, and other tribes who lived in the Sierra Nevada region had extensive knowledge of seasonal cycles, plant and animal behavior, and navigation techniques. But the level of astronomical understanding represented in the petroglyphs suggests capabilities that go beyond practical knowledge needed for daily survival. Some of the most intriguing astronomical petroglyphs are found at sites with specific geographical characteristics that enhance their function as observational instruments. Many are located on prominent rock outcrops with clear views of the eastern or western horizons, ideal positions for tracking the rising and setting of celestial objects. Others are situated near natural rock formations that frame particular portions of the sky, creating built-in reference points for astronomical observations. The orientation of individual petroglyph panels also appears to be significant. Many are carved on rock surfaces that face specific directions, often aligned with important astronomical events. For example, panels depicting summer solstice symbols frequently face toward the point on the horizon where the sun rises on the longest day of the year. This suggests that the petroglyphs weren't just records of astronomical knowledge, but also functional instruments designed to be used for ongoing observations. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Sierra Nevada astronomical petroglyphs is their apparent accuracy when compared to modern calculations of ancient sky conditions. Using computer programs that can recreate the night sky as it appeared thousands of years ago, researchers have found remarkable correlations between carved symbols and actual stellar positions. This precision suggests that the ancient observers weren't just casually noting bright stars, but were conducting systematic, long-term studies of celestial movements. The knowledge required to create these astronomical maps raises profound questions about prehistoric education and cultural transmission. How was such sophisticated information passed from one generation to the next? Were there specialized astronomer priests responsible for maintaining and updating the stellar knowledge? Did different groups share information about celestial observations, creating networks of astronomical knowledge across the region? Some researchers have proposed that the petroglyphs represent a form of prehistoric university, where knowledge about astronomy, navigation, and seasonal timing was preserved and taught. The wide distribution of similar symbols across hundreds of miles of mountain terrain suggests that this information was shared among different groups, possibly through trade relationships, intermarriage, or seasonal gatherings. The integration of astronomical knowledge with practical survival skills becomes evident when we examine how the petroglyphs relate to seasonal activities. Many star charts correspond to critical times for hunting, gathering, or migration. The appearance of certain constellations signaled when specific food resources would become available, when weather patterns would change, or when it was time to move to different elevations or regions. But the petroglyphs also suggest that ancient peoples viewed astronomy as more than just a practical tool. Many panels include symbols that appear to have religious or ceremonial significance, indicating that star knowledge was deeply embedded in spiritual beliefs and ritual practices. The night sky wasn't just a calendar or navigation aid, but a sacred realm populated by divine beings and cosmic forces that influenced earthly events. Modern Native American tribes in the Sierra Nevada region maintain oral traditions that provide some insight into the meaning of the astronomical petroglyphs. While these contemporary stories may not directly reflect the beliefs of the ancient petroglyph makers, they often contain references to stars, constellations, and celestial events that suggest continuity of astronomical knowledge over thousands of years. According to some tribal traditions, certain stars or star groups were associated with specific animals, seasons, or spiritual powers. The appearance of particular constellations marked important ceremonial times or guided decisions about resource management. These stories suggest that the astronomical knowledge embedded in the petroglyphs was part of a rich cultural tradition that connected practical survival skills with spiritual beliefs and community identity. The preservation of the Sierra Nevada astronomical petroglyphs faces ongoing challenges from natural weathering, human vandalism, and climate change. Many sites are located in remote areas that are difficult to monitor and protect. Weather extremes, including freeze-thaw cycles and flash flooding, gradually erode the carved symbols. Unfortunately, some visitors have damaged petroglyphs by touching them, adding their own carvings, or attempting to make rubbings or casts. Efforts to document and preserve these irreplaceable records of ancient astronomical knowledge have intensified in recent years. Researchers use advanced photography, three-dimensional scanning, and digital modeling to create permanent records of the petroglyphs before they deteriorate further. These techniques also allow for detailed analysis of carving techniques, symbol relationships, and astronomical alignments that might not be visible to casual observation. The study of Sierra Nevada astronomical petroglyphs has also benefited from collaboration between archaeologists, astronomers, and Native American communities. This interdisciplinary approach combines archaeological evidence with astronomical calculations and traditional knowledge to develop more complete understanding of how ancient peoples viewed and interacted with the night sky. Recent research has identified previously unknown astronomical correlations in the petroglyphs, including possible representations of eclipses, meteor showers, and planetary conjunctions. Some symbols that were once thought to be purely decorative are now recognized as sophisticated astronomical notations. This ongoing discovery process suggests that the full extent of astronomical knowledge embedded in the rock art is still being revealed. The implications of the Sierra Nevada astronomical petroglyphs extend far beyond regional archaeology. They provide evidence for the universal human drive to understand and record celestial phenomena, demonstrating that sophisticated astronomical knowledge developed independently in many different cultures around the world. They also challenge assumptions about the intellectual capabilities of prehistoric peoples, showing that complex scientific thinking existed long before the development of written language or formal educational institutions. Perhaps most importantly, the petroglyphs remind us that our ancestors lived in intimate connection with the natural world, including the movements of stars and planets that modern urban dwellers rarely notice. They possessed knowledge systems that integrated practical skills with spiritual beliefs, scientific observation with artistic expression, individual survival with community identity. In our age of light pollution and digital distraction, the Sierra Nevada astronomical petroglyphs offer a glimpse into a time when humans still remembered they were part of the cosmos. Deep in the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains of California lies a body of water so ancient and mysterious that it has inspired legends for thousands of years. Mono Lake, with its otherworldly landscape of towering limestone spires and impossibly salty waters, sits like a portal to another time. But this isn't just any ordinary lake. For the Paiute people who have called this region home for countless generations, Mono Lake is the dwelling place of something far more sinister than its strange geology might suggest. They call it the Kushtaka, and according to tribal elders, it's a creature that defies everything we think we know about the natural world. A shapeshifter that can take the form of both human and animal, luring unsuspecting travelers to their doom in the alkaline depths of this primordial lake. But what makes this legend particularly unsettling is how it persists even today, with modern witnesses claiming encounters that echo the ancient stories passed down through generations of Native Americans. The word Kushtaka itself comes from the Tlingit language, meaning land otter man, though the creature described around Mono Lake shares characteristics with similar beings found in Native American folklore across the Pacific Northwest and California. These aren't the friendly, playful otters you might see frolicking in coastal waters. According to legend, The Kushtaka is something altogether more disturbing, a supernatural entity that exists in the liminal space between the human and animal worlds. Mono Lake sits at an elevation of over 6,000 feet above sea level, surrounded by volcanic peaks and ancient lava flows that create an almost Martian landscape. The lake itself is at least 760,000 years old, making it one of the oldest continuously existing bodies of water in North America. Its waters are nearly 3 times saltier than the ocean, creating an environment so unique that it supports only a handful of specialized species. Brine shrimp and alkali flies thrive in this harsh ecosystem, their populations so dense that they create clouds of insects that can be seen from miles away. But it's not just the lake's unusual chemistry that makes it feel otherworldly. Rising from its alkaline waters are massive limestone formations called tufas, carved by centuries of volcanic activity and mineral deposits. These towers and spires create a haunting landscape that changes with the light, casting long shadows that seem to shift and move even when the air is still. At sunset and sunrise, the formations take on an ethereal quality, glowing like ancient monuments in colors that range from deep orange to ghostly white. For the Paiute people, this landscape has always been more than just scenically dramatic. It's a place where the veil between worlds grows thin, where spirits and supernatural beings make their presence known. The Kushtaka, they say, uses the lake's strange environment to its advantage, employing the shifting shadows and mineral formations as camouflage while it hunts. According to traditional stories, the Kushtaka appears most commonly as an otter, but one that's unnaturally large and intelligent. Witnesses describe creatures that seem almost human in their behavior, walking upright on their hind legs and displaying problem-solving abilities that go far beyond normal animal intelligence. But the most disturbing aspect of these encounters is the creature's ability to mimic human voices and behavior. Tribal elders tell of travelers who encountered what appeared to be other humans near the lake, only to realize too late that something was terribly wrong. The Kushtaka, they say, can perfectly imitate the voice of a loved one, calling out from the darkness to lure victims closer to the water. It can take on human form, appearing as a lost traveler in need of help, or as a familiar face from someone's past. Only when it's too late do victims realize that the person they thought they were helping has features that don't quite look right, eyes that reflect light in an unnatural way, or movements that seem just slightly off. The legends describe the Kushtaka as having an almost vampiric relationship with human life force. Rather than simply killing its victims, it's said to drain them of their essential humanity, leaving behind empty shells that continue to exist but are fundamentally changed. Some stories tell of people who returned from encounters with the creature, but were never quite the same afterward, speaking in strange voices or displaying knowledge of things they shouldn't know. What makes these legends particularly intriguing is how they've adapted and persisted into the modern era. While the core mythology remains rooted in ancient Paiute tradition, contemporary accounts of strange encounters around Mono Lake continue to surface, suggesting that whatever inspired these stories hasn't disappeared with the passage of time. In the 1970s, a group of geology students from the University of California were conducting research around the lake when they reported an encounter that seemed to echo the ancient legends. According to their account, they were setting up camp near the shoreline when they heard what sounded like one of their professors calling for help from somewhere near the tufa formations. The voice was unmistakably familiar, and they immediately went to investigate. What they found was their professor, or at least something that looked exactly like him, standing waist-deep in the alkaline water near one of the limestone towers. He was beckoning them to come closer, claiming he'd made an important discovery that they needed to see. But something about the scene felt wrong. The professor's voice carried strangely across the water, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. His movements appeared stilted, almost mechanical, and when the students called out questions, his responses were just slightly off, as if he weren't quite understanding what they were asking. One of the students had the presence of mind to radio back to their base camp, only to discover that their professor was there, safe and accounted for. When they looked back toward the water, the figure had disappeared entirely, leaving no trace that anyone had been there at all. The students reported that the experience left them deeply unsettled, not just because of what they'd seen, but because of how compelling the apparition had been. They admitted that if not for the radio contact, they likely would have waded into the dangerous alkaline water to help what they believed was their colleague. Park rangers and local law enforcement have documented numerous similar incidents over the decades. Hikers report hearing familiar voices calling from impossible locations. Campers describe encounters with people who seem to know intimate details about their lives, but whose behavior becomes increasingly strange as conversations continue. In many cases, these encounters occur near the water's edge, with the mysterious figures always trying to coax witnesses closer to the lake. Dr. Sarah Winnemucca, a cultural anthropologist and member of the Northern Paiute tribe, has spent years studying the Kushtaka legends and their connection to Mono Lake's unique environment. She suggests that the stories serve multiple purposes within traditional Native American culture, functioning not just as supernatural folklore, but as practical warnings about the very real dangers of the lake's ecosystem. Mono Lake's alkaline water can cause severe chemical burns, and its unusual mineral composition creates conditions that can be fatal to anyone who accidentally falls in. The lake's high salt content makes it nearly impossible to swim in normally, and the alkaline chemistry can cause temporary blindness and severe skin irritation. For ancient peoples who relied on clear water sources for survival, a lake that could kill you if you drank from it or fell into it would naturally become associated with supernatural danger. But Dr. Winnemucca also points out that the Kushtaka legends contain elements that go beyond simple warnings about environmental hazards. The creature's shape-shifting abilities and its connection to voices and mimicry suggest a deeper understanding of how the lake's unique acoustic properties can create auditory illusions. The limestone formations and mineral-laden air around Mono Lake create conditions where sounds can carry in unexpected ways, potentially creating the impression that voices are coming from locations where no one is present. The lake's surface, with its high mineral content and unusual density, can also create visual distortions that might make objects or people appear to be in different locations than they actually are. Combined with the shifting light conditions created by the towering tufa formations, it's possible that the Mono Lake environment naturally generates the kind of sensory confusion that could give rise to stories about shape-shifting creatures and supernatural encounters. Yet even accounting for these rational explanations, the persistence and consistency of modern encounters suggest that something more complex might be at work. Witnesses consistently describe not just visual or auditory illusions, but encounters with entities that seem to possess knowledge and intelligence that goes beyond what might be explained by environmental factors alone. In the early 2000s, a team of paranormal investigators decided to spend several nights camping around Mono Lake, hoping to document some of the phenomena described in witness accounts. Using a combination of traditional recording equipment and thermal imaging cameras, they set up monitoring stations at several locations around the lake's perimeter. On their second night, their equipment registered what appeared to be a human figure moving through the tufa formations, but the thermal signature was unlike anything they'd seen before. The figure appeared to radiate cold rather than heat, showing up as a dark silhouette against the warmer background rocks. Even stranger, the figure seemed to be moving in ways that defied normal human locomotion, at times appearing to flow like liquid between the limestone formations. When they reviewed their audio recordings, they found hours of what sounded like conversations taking place near their campsite, but analysis revealed that the voices were coming from empty areas where no one was present. The conversations themselves were fragmentary and strange, consisting of phrases that seemed to be responses to questions that weren't being asked, or statements that made no sense in context. The investigation team reported that while they never had any direct visual encounters with whatever was creating these phenomena, they consistently felt as though they were being watched and followed throughout their stay. Several team members described dreams in which they were approached by family members or friends who tried to convince them to leave their tents and walk into the lake. The dreams were so vivid and compelling that two of the investigators had to be physically restrained by their colleagues to prevent them from sleepwalking toward the water. What makes the Kushtaka legends particularly fascinating from an anthropological perspective is how they reflect themes found in shapeshifter mythology around the world. The concept of beings that exist between human and animal forms appears in cultures from Scandinavia to South America, suggesting that these stories tap into something fundamental about human psychology and our relationship with the natural world. The Kushtaka specifically seems to represent anxieties about identity and authenticity, playing on the fear that the people we trust might not be who they appear to be. In an environment as harsh and unforgiving as the Mono Lake region, where survival often depended on being able to trust your companions and rely on familiar landmarks, the idea of a creature that could perfectly mimic both human voices and appearances would represent the ultimate threat. But the legends also contain elements of transformation and boundary crossing that suggest deeper spiritual significance. In many Native American traditions, shapeshifters are not simply malevolent entities, but represent the fluid nature of reality itself. The idea that the boundaries between different states of being are more permeable than they appear. Some contemporary researchers have suggested that the Kushtaka legends might preserve memories of actual encounters with unknown species or phenomena. The Mono Lake region has been continuously inhabited by humans for thousands of years, and its unique ecosystem has been isolated from broader biological communities for much of that time. It's possible that the lake and its surrounding environment could harbor species or phenomena that don't exist anywhere else. The lake's extreme age and unusual chemistry have created conditions that support life forms found nowhere else on Earth. Scientists have discovered bacteria and other microorganisms in Mono Lake that challenge our understanding of how life can adapt to extreme environments. Some of these organisms have biochemistries so unusual that they've been studied as potential models for life on other planets. Could it be possible that this same environment has given rise to larger, more complex organisms that don't fit into our normal taxonomic categories? While there's no direct evidence for such creatures, the possibility remains intriguing, especially given the consistency of witness accounts over such a long period of time. The Kushtaka legends also raise questions about the nature of consciousness and identity. If witnesses are indeed encountering entities that can perfectly mimic human behavior and knowledge, what does that tell us about the nature of self and identity? Are these encounters revealing something about the way consciousness itself works, or about the possibility that awareness and intelligence might manifest in forms we don't yet understand? Modern neuroscience has revealed that human consciousness is far more fluid and constructed than we once believed. Our sense of self and identity is constantly being created and recreated by our brains, using a combination of memory, sensory input, and social cues. In environments where these normal cues are disrupted or distorted, it's possible that consciousness itself might become more malleable, more open to influence from external sources. The alkaline environment around Mono Lake creates conditions that can affect human perception and cognition in subtle but significant ways. The high altitude and unusual mineral content of the air can cause mild hypoxia and other physiological changes that alter brain function. Combined with the sensory distortions created by the lake's unique acoustic and visual properties, it's possible that extended exposure to this environment could make individuals more susceptible to experiences that blur the line between internal and external reality. Yet even accounting for these physiological factors, the specific consistency of Kushtaka encounters suggests that something more than simple environmental effects might be at work. Witnesses don't just report random hallucinations or confused perceptions. They report encounters with entities that seem to possess specific knowledge and intentions, creatures that appear to be deliberately using deception and mimicry to achieve particular goals. The question remains, what exactly are people encountering around Mono Lake? Are the Kushtaka legends preserving memories of encounters with unknown species, undiscovered psychological phenomena, or something else entirely? The answer may be less important than the questions themselves, which continue to challenge our assumptions about the nature of reality and our place within it. As we move deeper into the 21st century, the Kushtaka legends continue to evolve and adapt, incorporating new technologies and contemporary concerns while maintaining their core themes of transformation and deception. Social media has allowed for the rapid sharing of encounter stories, creating new networks of witnesses and investigators who are documenting phenomena around Mono Lake with unprecedented detail and sophistication. But perhaps the most important aspect of these legends is what they reveal about the enduring human need to find meaning and mystery in the natural world. In an age of satellite imagery and GPS tracking, places like Mono Lake continue to harbor secrets that resist easy explanation. The Kushtaka represents our acknowledgement that no matter how much we think we know about the world around us, there are still phenomena that operate according to rules we don't yet understand. The alkaline waters of Mono Lake continue to reflect the ancient limestone spires that rise from its depths, creating an ever-changing landscape of light and shadow that has inspired wonder and fear for countless generations. Whether the Kushtaka exists as a physical entity, a psychological phenomenon, or something else entirely, its presence in the stories and experiences of those who encounter this strange corner of California serves as a reminder that mystery and wonder still exist in our modern world, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to venture into the liminal spaces where the known and unknown meet. 25 miles off the coast of Southern California, shrouded in Pacific fog and separated from the mainland by some of the most treacherous waters on the West Coast, lies a chain of islands that holds one of paleontology's most perplexing mysteries. The Channel Islands, often called California's Galapagos, were once home to creatures so bizarre and unexpected that their discovery fundamentally changed our understanding of evolution, extinction, and the delicate balance that governs life on Earth. For thousands of years, these islands supported a population of elephants unlike any that had ever existed. They were pygmy mammoths, standing barely 6 feet tall at the shoulder, descendants of the massive Columbian mammoths that once roamed the North American mainland. But around 13,000 years ago, these remarkable creatures vanished completely, disappearing so rapidly and thoroughly that their extinction represents one of the most dramatic and mysterious die-offs in the fossil record. What makes this extinction particularly puzzling is not just its speed, but its timing. These dwarf mammoths had survived on the Channel Islands for tens of thousands of years, successfully adapting to their isolated environment and thriving in ways their mainland relatives never could. They had weathered ice ages, climate shifts, and countless other challenges that drove their larger cousins to extinction. Yet something happened 13,000 years ago that wiped them out entirely in what appears to have been a matter of decades, possibly even years. The story begins during the last ice age, when sea levels were dramatically lower than they are today. What we now know as the Channel Islands were connected to each other and much closer to the mainland, forming a single large landmass that scientists call Santurce Island. During this period, Columbian mammoths, massive creatures that could stand 14 feet tall and weigh up to 10 tons, somehow made their way across the channel that separated this ancient island from the coast of California. How exactly they managed this crossing remains a mystery in itself. Columbian mammoths were not known for their swimming abilities, and even during periods of lowest sea level, The crossing would have required traveling through several miles of open ocean. Some researchers suggest that the mammoths might have been caught on ice floes that carried them across the channel, while others propose that they were strong enough swimmers to make the journey intentionally, perhaps following food sources or fleeing predators on the mainland. Once they arrived on Santarasi Island, these mammoths found themselves in a very different world from the one they had left behind. The island environment was smaller, more isolated, and had different food sources than the vast grasslands of the mainland. Over thousands of generations, the mammoth population began to change in response to these new conditions, undergoing a process that scientists call insular dwarfism. Insular dwarfism is a well-documented phenomenon in which large animals that become isolated on islands gradually evolve to become smaller. This happens for several reasons. Islands typically have limited food resources, so smaller animals that require less food to survive have a competitive advantage. Islands also often lack the large predators that mainland populations need to defend against, reducing the survival advantage of large body size. Over time, these selective pressures cause the average size of the population to decrease with each generation. The Channel Islands mammoths underwent this process to a remarkable degree. Starting from ancestors that weighed up to 10 tons, they evolved over the course of several thousand years into creatures that weighed less than 1 ton. But they didn't just become smaller versions of their mainland relatives. The island environment shaped them in other ways as well, creating animals that were uniquely adapted to their isolated home. These pygmy mammoths developed longer, more curved tusks relative to their body size, possibly as an adaptation for stripping bark from the island's native vegetation. Their leg bones became proportionally thicker and stronger, perhaps to help them navigate the rocky, uneven terrain of their island home. Their teeth evolved to be more efficient at processing the specific types of plants available on the islands, and their social behavior appears to have changed as well, with evidence suggesting they lived in smaller family groups than their mainland relatives. For tens of thousands of years, this island population thrived. The Channel Islands provided everything the dwarf mammoths needed: diverse vegetation, fresh water sources, caves for shelter, and most importantly, an absence of the predators and competitors that had made life so challenging for mammoths on the mainland. Archaeological evidence suggests that the population remained stable for millennia, with multiple generations of mammoths living and dying on the islands without any significant threats to their survival. But then, around 13,000 years ago, something changed. The fossil record shows clear evidence that the entire population of Channel Islands mammoths disappeared within a remarkably short period of time. Unlike the gradual decline that characterized mammoth extinctions in other parts of the world, the island population appears to have gone from thriving to extinct in what may have been less than a century. What makes this extinction even more mysterious is that it occurred during a period when the mammoths should have been better positioned to survive than ever before. The end of the last ice age brought milder temperatures and increased vegetation growth to the Channel Islands. Sea levels were rising, but slowly enough that the mammoths should have had time to adapt to the changing geography of their island home. There were no obvious environmental catastrophes, no evidence of disease outbreaks, and no signs of resource competition that might explain such a rapid collapse. The first major clue to understanding this mystery came in the 1990s, when archaeologists working on the Channel Islands began finding evidence of early human presence that coincided almost exactly with the disappearance of the dwarf mammoths. Radiocarbon dating of human artifacts and mammoth bones revealed that the two species had coexisted on the islands for only a very brief period, perhaps as little as a few hundred years, before the mammoths vanished entirely. This discovery immediately raised the possibility that human hunting was responsible for the mammoth extinction. Native American peoples had been living along the California coast for thousands of years, and they certainly had the skills and technology needed to hunt large game. The timing seemed to support this hypothesis, as mammoth extinctions in other parts of the world often coincided with the arrival of human populations. But as researchers dug deeper into the evidence, they found that the human hunting hypothesis, while plausible, didn't fully explain the speed and completeness of the mammoth extinction. The early human population on the Channel Islands appears to have been quite small, probably numbering only a few dozen individuals at most. While these people were certainly capable hunters, it's difficult to understand how such a small group could have wiped out an entire species that had numbered in the hundreds or possibly thousands of individuals. Moreover, archaeological evidence suggests that the island's human inhabitants were not primarily mammoth hunters. Their tool assemblages and food remains indicate that they relied mainly on marine resources like fish, shellfish, and sea mammals, with only occasional hunting of land animals. While mammoth bones do appear at some human sites, they represent a small fraction of the total food remains, suggesting that mammoth hunting was not a major subsistence activity. This has led researchers to consider more complex explanations for the extinction that involve multiple interacting factors rather than a single cause. One possibility is that human presence, even if it didn't involve intensive hunting, disrupted the mammoth population in ways that made it vulnerable to other threats. The Channel Islands mammoth population, despite having survived for thousands of years, was always inherently fragile due to its small size and geographic isolation. Island populations are particularly vulnerable to what scientists call stochastic events, random occurrences that can have disproportionately large effects on small populations. A single bad year for reproduction, a disease outbreak, or an environmental disaster that might have little impact on a large mainland population could be catastrophic for an isolated island species. Human presence might have increased the frequency or severity of these stochastic events in ways that weren't immediately obvious. Even limited hunting could have reduced the mammoth population below a critical threshold, making it vulnerable to other pressures. Human activities like fire management or plant gathering could have altered the island's vegetation in ways that affected mammoth food sources. The introduction of human-associated diseases or parasites could have weakened the mammoth population without leaving clear archaeological evidence. Some researchers have proposed that the extinction might have been triggered by a combination of human pressure and climate change effects that were specific to the island environment. As sea levels rose following the end of the Ice Age, the total land area available to the mammoths decreased significantly. The Channel Islands today are much smaller than they were 13,000 years ago, and this reduction in habitat size would have put additional stress on the mammoth population. At the same time, rising sea levels changed the island's freshwater resources. Many of the streams and springs that the mammoths relied on would have been affected by saltwater intrusion as the ocean rose. The island's vegetation communities would have changed as well, as plants adapted to the new climate conditions and reduced land area. These environmental changes, while gradual on a human timescale, could have created cumulative stress on a mammoth population that was already dealing with the pressures of human presence. Another intriguing possibility is that the mammoth extinction was related to a specific catastrophic event that occurred around 13,000 years ago. Some researchers have suggested that the extinction coincides with evidence for a massive tsunami that struck the California coast during this period. Geological evidence from the Channel Islands shows deposits of marine sediments and debris that appear to have been deposited by an enormous wave that swept across the islands, possibly triggered by an underwater landslide or earthquake. Such a tsunami would have been devastating to the mammoth population, potentially drowning many individuals and destroying crucial habitat and freshwater resources. Even if some mammoths survived the initial event, the damage to their environment might have been severe enough to push the remaining population past the point of viability. The tsunami hypothesis is supported by the fact that the mammoth extinction appears to have been extremely rapid, consistent with a single catastrophic event rather than a gradual decline. However, the evidence for this tsunami is still being debated among researchers, and it's not clear whether such an event would have been severe enough to cause complete extinction rather than just a population bottleneck from which the mammoths might have recovered. More recent research has begun to focus on the role of genetic factors in the mammoth extinction. Small, isolated populations like the Channel Islands mammoths are vulnerable to genetic problems that don't affect larger populations. Inbreeding can lead to the accumulation of harmful genetic mutations, while genetic drift can cause the loss of beneficial traits. Over time, these processes can reduce a population's ability to adapt to environmental challenges or recover from setbacks. Genetic analysis of mammoth remains from the Channel Islands has revealed evidence that the population was indeed experiencing genetic stress in the period leading up to its extinction. The mammoths show signs of reduced genetic diversity and possible inbreeding depression, suggesting that the population had become so small and isolated that it was losing its evolutionary flexibility. This genetic vulnerability might have made the mammoths particularly susceptible to any additional stresses, whether from human activities, environmental changes, or random catastrophic events. A population that was already genetically compromised might have been unable to recover from pressures that a healthier population could have survived. The mystery of the Channel Islands mammoth extinction has implications that extend far beyond the fate of a single species. These islands represent a natural laboratory for understanding how evolution and extinction work in isolated environments, and the mammoth disappearance provides crucial insights into the factors that determine whether species survive or vanish when faced with rapid environmental change. The speed of the mammoth extinction is particularly relevant to current conservation concerns, as it demonstrates how quickly stable populations can collapse when multiple stress factors combine. Many species today face similar challenges to those that may have driven the island mammoths extinct: habitat loss, climate change, human pressure, and genetic isolation. Understanding what happened on the Channel Islands 13,000 years ago could help us better predict and prevent extinctions in the modern world. The mammoth mystery also highlights the complex relationship between humans and the environments they inhabit. The early peoples who lived on the Channel Islands were not reckless destroyers of nature, but skilled hunter-gatherers who had successfully adapted to challenging marine environments. Yet their presence still appears to have contributed to one of the most dramatic extinctions in the archaeological record, demonstrating that even small human populations can have significant ecological impacts under the right circumstances. Recent advances in ancient DNA research have opened new possibilities for understanding the Channel Islands mammoth extinction. Scientists are now able to extract and analyze genetic material from mammoth bones and teeth that are thousands of years old, providing unprecedented insights into the population structure, migration patterns, and evolutionary history of these remarkable creatures. This genetic research has revealed that the Channel Islands mammoths were more closely related to Columbian mammoths from the mainland than previously thought, confirming that they were indeed descended from immigrants that crossed the channel during the Ice Age. The genetic data also suggests that there may have been multiple colonization events, with different groups of mammoths reaching the islands at different times. Perhaps most intriguingly, the genetic evidence indicates that the Channel Islands population remained connected to mainland mammoth populations for much longer than previously believed, with occasional gene flow occurring between the island and mainland populations, even after the islands had become geographically isolated. This suggests that the island mammoth's evolution and ultimate extinction may have been influenced by their ongoing genetic relationship with their mainland relatives. As research continues, new theories about the mammoth extinction continue to emerge. Some scientists have proposed that the extinction might have been caused by a perfect storm of factors that converged during a critical period in the island's history. The combination of rising sea levels, changing vegetation, human arrival, genetic stress, and possibly a catastrophic event like a tsunami or volcanic eruption might have created conditions that no island population could have survived. Others have suggested that the extinction might have been even more complex, involving cascading ecological effects that are difficult to detect in the archaeological record. The loss of the mammoths themselves might have triggered changes in the island's plant communities, which in turn affected other animal species, creating a downward spiral that reshaped the entire island ecosystem. The Channel Islands today are a very different place from the world that the dwarf mammoths once knew. The islands are now home to a variety of endemic species that evolved after the mammoth extinction, creating new ecological communities that have no memory of the giants that once roamed these shores. But traces of the mammoth legacy remain, preserved in the fossil record and in the ongoing research that continues to uncover new aspects of their remarkable story. The mystery of why these successful, well-adapted creatures disappeared so suddenly 13,000 years ago continues to challenge our understanding of extinction, evolution, and the delicate balance that governs life on our planet. As we face our own period of rapid environmental change and species loss, the story of the Channel Islands mammoth serves as both a warning and a source of scientific insight, reminding us that even the most successful adaptations are not guaranteed to last forever in a world where change is the only constant. Deep in Northern California rises a mountain that has captivated the imagination for centuries. Mount Shasta stands 14,418 feet above sea level, its snow-capped peak piercing the sky like a monument to mysteries we can't quite grasp. But according to countless witnesses, explorers, and believers, the real mystery isn't what lies above ground. It's what supposedly exists far beneath the surface, in tunnels and caverns that stretch deep into the earth itself. For over a century, people have claimed that Mount Shasta is home to something extraordinary. Not just another underground cave system or natural formation, but an entire hidden civilization. A lost city inhabited by tall, ethereal beings who call themselves Lemurians, survivors of a continent that supposedly sank beneath the Pacific Ocean thousands of years ago. The stories are so persistent, so detailed, and so widespread that they've become part of the mountain's identity. But are they real, or are they simply the product of human imagination running wild in one of California's most mystical places? The legend begins with Lemuria itself, a theoretical lost continent that was once believed to have existed in the Pacific Ocean. The idea emerged in the 1800s when scientists were trying to explain the distribution of lemur fossils across Madagascar, India, and Southeast Asia. They theorized that a land bridge or continent called Lemuria must have connected these regions, allowing the animals to spread across what are now vast stretches of ocean. While modern science has since explained this distribution through plate tectonics and continental drift, the idea of Lemuria captured the public imagination and took on a life of its own. According to the Mount Shasta legends, when Lemuria began to sink beneath the waves around 12,000 years ago, some of its inhabitants escaped to safety. These survivors, possessing advanced technology and spiritual knowledge far beyond anything known to modern humans, sought refuge in various locations around the world. One group supposedly made their way to Mount Shasta, where they established an underground city called Telos, hidden deep within the mountain's volcanic chambers. The first widely publicized account of these underground dwellers came from Frederick Spencer Oliver, who in 1886 published a book called A Dweller on Two Planets. Oliver claimed the book was channeled to him by an ascended master, and it described an advanced civilization living beneath Mount Shasta. But it was the accounts that followed in the early 1900s that really cemented the legend in popular culture. One of the most detailed descriptions came from a man named J.C. Brown, who claimed to be a British prospector. In 1904, Brown reported that he had discovered a cave system near Mount Shasta while searching for gold. According to his account, he followed a tunnel deep into the mountain and discovered something that defied belief. He claimed to have found an underground city filled with golden artifacts, mummified remains of giant humanoid beings, and hieroglyphic writings covering the walls. Brown's story might have remained just another prospector's tall tale, but he didn't keep it to himself. He supposedly spent decades researching his discovery, making return trips to document what he had found. Then, in 1934, he contacted the treasure seekers of San Jose, a group dedicated to finding lost artifacts and hidden treasures. Brown told them he was ready to reveal his discovery to the world and invited them to join him on an expedition to the underground city. A team of 29 people gathered for the expedition, their bags packed and their equipment ready. They waited for Brown at a predetermined meeting spot, excitement running high as they prepared to venture into what could be the archaeological discovery of the century. But Brown never showed up. He had simply vanished, leaving behind only his incredible story and a group of disappointed treasure hunters. Some believed he had been silenced by forces that wanted to keep the underground city secret. Others suspected he had made the whole thing up and disappeared rather than face exposure as a fraud. But Brown's disappearance only added fuel to the fire. Throughout the 1900s, more and more people came forward with their own encounters near Mount Shasta. They described seeing tall, graceful beings dressed in white robes, sometimes appearing in the forests around the mountain or in the nearby town of Mount Shasta City. These beings were said to be extremely tall, often 7 feet or more, with long flowing hair and an otherworldly presence that set them apart from ordinary humans. The descriptions were remarkably consistent across different witnesses and time periods. The beings were described as having pale, almost luminous skin, large eyes filled with ancient wisdom, and an aura of peace and spirituality that seemed to radiate from them. They reportedly could appear and disappear at will, sometimes walking among humans in the town below, purchasing supplies or simply observing. Store owners and locals claimed that these mysterious visitors would pay for their goods with gold nuggets or strange coins, then vanish back into the wilderness before anyone could follow them. One of the most famous encounters occurred in the 1930s, when a local resident named Guy Warren Ballard claimed to have met one of these beings while hiking on Mount Shasta. According to Ballard, he encountered a man who introduced himself as Saint Germain, an ascended master from the underground city. This being supposedly shared with Ballard profound spiritual teachings and knowledge about the hidden civilization beneath the mountain. Ballard's encounter led to the founding of the I Am religious movement, which attracted thousands of followers who believed in the existence of ascended masters living beneath Mount Shasta. The movement taught that these beings were highly evolved souls who had transcended physical limitations and now worked to guide humanity towards spiritual enlightenment. While the I Am movement eventually faced controversy and legal challenges, it helped spread the Lemurian legend far beyond California's borders. The physical evidence for an underground civilization beneath Mount Shasta remains elusive, but that hasn't stopped people from searching. The mountain's volcanic nature means it does contain numerous caves, lava tubes, and underground chambers formed by ancient eruptions. Some of these natural formations are indeed large enough to house significant spaces, and many remain unexplored due to their remote locations and dangerous conditions. Geologists point out that Mount Shasta is part of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, a chain of volcanoes that extends from northern California to British Columbia. The mountain has erupted multiple times throughout history, with the most recent activity occurring around 200 years ago. These eruptions created a complex network of underground spaces, some of which could theoretically be large enough to support the kind of civilization described in the legends. However, the practical challenges of maintaining an underground city in an active volcanic system are enormous. The temperature fluctuations, gas emissions, and potential for seismic activity would make such an environment extremely dangerous for human habitation. Modern volcanology suggests that while small pockets of stable space might exist within the mountain, a large, permanent settlement would be virtually impossible to sustain over thousands of years. Despite these scientific challenges, the reports and sightings continue to this day. Modern visitors to Mount Shasta frequently describe unusual experiences that they struggle to explain. Some report seeing strange lights emanating from within the mountain at night, lights that don't correspond to any known human activity in the area. Others describe encounters with unusually tall, robed figures in the forests, beings who seem to appear and disappear without a trace. Hikers and campers often report feeling a strange energy around certain areas of the mountain, particularly near cave entrances or in secluded valleys. Some describe a sense of being watched or accompanied by an invisible presence while exploring the mountain's remote areas. These experiences are so common that they've become part of the mountain's folklore, shared around campfires and in online forums dedicated to Mount Shasta mysteries. The town of Mount Shasta City, which sits at the base of the mountain, has embraced its connection to the legend. New Age shops, crystal stores, and spiritual centers line the main street, catering to the thousands of seekers who visit each year hopping to encounter the mysterious Lemurians. The local economy has benefited significantly from this mystical tourism, with hotels, restaurants, and tour guides all capitalizing on the mountain's otherworldly reputation. Some researchers have attempted to find scientific explanations for the persistent reports of unusual activity around Mount Shasta. They point to the mountain's unique geological properties, including high levels of certain minerals that might affect electromagnetic fields in the area. These conditions could potentially cause unusual atmospheric phenomena, such as strange lights or optical illusions that might be interpreted as supernatural occurrences. The mountain's elevation and location also make it prone to unique weather patterns that could create unusual visual effects. Lenticular clouds, which form around mountain peaks under specific atmospheric conditions, can create disc-shaped formations that might be mistaken for unidentified flying objects. Temperature inversions can cause distant objects to appear closer or create mirage effects that could contribute to sightings of mysterious figures or structures. Psychological factors may also play a role in the persistence of the Lemurian legend. Mount Shasta's imposing presence and natural beauty create an atmosphere that's conducive to mystical experiences and altered states of consciousness. The mountain has long been considered sacred by local Native American tribes, who have their own legends about spiritual beings dwelling within its slopes. This cultural context may predispose visitors to interpret unusual experiences through a supernatural lens. The Native American connection to Mount Shasta adds another layer to the mystery. The Wintu, Modoc, and other local tribes have traditional stories about the mountain being inhabited by powerful spirits and otherworldly beings. Some of these legends describe tall, pale beings who lived inside the mountain and occasionally interacted with humans. While these stories predate the modern Lemurian legend by centuries, the similarities are striking and suggest that the mountain has long been associated with mysterious inhabitants. Some researchers have theorized that the modern Lemurian legend might be a reinterpretation of these older Native American stories, filtered through European and American spiritual movements of the late 1800s and early 1900s. The rise of theosophy and other esoteric movements during this period created a cultural context where lost civilizations and hidden masters were popular concepts, providing a framework for understanding and expanding upon the older indigenous legends. The question of whether the Lemurian city beneath Mount Shasta actually exists remains unanswered. No archaeological evidence has been found to support the existence of an ancient underground civilization, despite decades of searching by both amateur enthusiasts and professional researchers. The cave systems that have been explored within the mountain show no signs of artificial construction or long-term human habitation. However, the vast majority of Mount Shasta's underground spaces remain unexplored. The mountain's remote location, dangerous terrain, and protected status make comprehensive exploration extremely difficult. It's entirely possible that significant cave systems exist that have never been documented or investigated. Whether these spaces could harbor the remnants of an ancient civilization, or even a modern group living in isolation, remains an open question. The persistence of the legend itself is perhaps as mysterious as the supposed civilization it describes. For over a century, people from all walks of life have reported encounters with the Lemurians of Mount Shasta. These witnesses include respected community members, business owners, scientists, and skeptics who had no prior belief in such phenomena. The consistency of their accounts, spanning different time periods and cultural contexts, suggests that something unusual is indeed happening around the mountain, even if the true explanation remains elusive. Modern technology has brought new tools to bear on the mystery. Ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, and seismic monitoring equipment could potentially detect large underground spaces or unusual activity within the mountain. However, the challenging terrain and environmental conditions make deploying such equipment difficult, and Mount Shasta's protected status limits the scope of what researchers are allowed to do. Satellite imagery has revealed some interesting features around Mount Shasta, including what appear to be unusual geometric patterns in the forest canopy and possible cave entrances that haven't been fully explored. While these features likely have natural explanations, they continue to fuel speculation about hidden structures or entrances to underground spaces. The digital age has also transformed how the Mount Shasta mystery is investigated and discussed. Online communities of researchers and enthusiasts share photos, videos, and accounts of unusual experiences around the mountain. While much of this material is of questionable authenticity, some documented cases remain genuinely puzzling and deserve serious investigation. Whether the Lemurians of Mount Shasta are real beings from a lost civilization, misidentified natural phenomena, or products of human imagination and cultural mythology, their legend continues to captivate people from around the world. The mountain remains a pilgrimage site for spiritual seekers, a subject of investigation for researchers, and a source of wonder for anyone interested in the mysteries that still exist in our modern world. In the spring of 1982, a man named Russell Burrows was exploring the rugged hills of southern Illinois when he made a discovery that would either rewrite American history or become one of archaeology's most controversial hoaxes. According to Burrows, he stumbled upon a hidden cave system filled with thousands of ancient artifacts, many bearing hieroglyphic inscriptions and artistic styles that appeared to be Egyptian, Roman, Greek, and Hebrew in origin. The implications were staggering. If authentic, these artifacts would prove that Old World civilizations had reached North America centuries or even millennia before Columbus. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn toward California. While Burrows Cave was supposedly located in Illinois, similar artifacts and claims have emerged from various locations across the American West, including several sites in California. These discoveries have created a complex web of mystery, controversy, and speculation that continues to puzzle researchers and enthusiasts to this day. The California connection to ancient Old World artifacts actually predates the Burrows Cave discovery by many decades. Throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s, newspapers across California reported the discovery of mysterious relics in caves and underground chambers throughout the state. These reports described Egyptian-style artifacts, Roman coins, Hebrew inscriptions, and other items that seemed wildly out of place in pre-Columbian America. One of the most famous early cases occurred in 1896 in the mountains east of Los Angeles. According to contemporary newspaper accounts, a group of miners working in the San Gabriel Mountains discovered a cave containing what appeared to be ancient Egyptian artifacts. The cave, located in a remote canyon, reportedly contained stone tablets covered with hieroglyphic inscriptions, ceramic vessels in Egyptian style, and even what appeared to be mummified remains wrapped in linen, similar to Egyptian burial practices. The discovery was initially treated as legitimate by local newspapers, who reported that experts from the area's museums were planning to investigate the find. However, like many such discoveries from this era, the artifacts seemed to vanish from public view before any thorough scientific analysis could be conducted. Some researchers suggest this pattern of disappearing evidence points to a deliberate cover-up by academic institutions unwilling to challenge established historical narratives. Another significant California case emerged in the 1920s in the Mojave Desert region. Prospectors searching for gold in a remote canyon claimed to have discovered a series of connected caves containing hundreds of stone tablets covered with various ancient scripts. The tablets allegedly bore inscriptions in Egyptian hieroglyphs, Hebrew, Greek, and several unidentified writing systems. Photographs of some of these tablets were reportedly taken, but like the artifacts themselves, most of this documentation has been lost to time. What makes these California discoveries particularly intriguing is their apparent connection to the broader phenomenon of anomalous archaeological finds throughout the American West. Similar reports have emerged from Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and other western states, suggesting either a widespread pattern of ancient Old World contact with the Americas or an equally widespread pattern of hoaxes and misidentifications. The artifacts described in these various discoveries share several common characteristics that either point to their authenticity or reveal the consistent elements of an elaborate deception. Many feature hieroglyphic inscriptions that combine genuine Egyptian symbols with Hebrew letters and other ancient scripts. The artistic styles often blend Egyptian, Roman, and Middle Eastern influences in ways that would be unusual for either genuine ancient artifacts or modern forgeries created by someone without extensive knowledge of these cultures. One of the most puzzling aspects of the California cave artifacts is their supposed distribution across the state. Reports have emerged from the Sierra Nevada mountains, the Mojave Desert, the coastal ranges, and even from caves in Northern California near the Oregon border. This wide geographic spread raises questions about how such artifacts could have been distributed across such a vast area if they represent genuine ancient deposits. Some researchers have proposed that these discoveries represent evidence of ancient mining operations conducted by Old World civilizations. They point to the numerous reports of artifacts found in association with what appear to be ancient mining sites, complete with carved chambers, ventilation shafts, and tool marks on stone walls. The theory suggests that Egyptian, Phoenician, or other Mediterranean civilizations may have established mining colonies in the American West to extract gold, silver, and other precious materials. The mining theory gains some support from the fact that many of the artifact discoveries have been made in areas known for their mineral wealth. The California gold rush of the 1800s revealed that the state contained vast gold deposits, and it's conceivable that ancient peoples might have been aware of these resources and developed the technology to exploit them. However, the logistics of organizing and maintaining such distant mining operations using ancient technology presents enormous challenges that skeptics argue make this scenario implausible. Another theory suggests that the California cave artifacts represent the remains of medieval or early colonial expeditions that somehow made their way to the American West long before official European exploration. Some researchers have proposed that Irish monks, Viking explorers, or even Knights Templar fleeing persecution in Europe might have established hidden settlements in remote American locations. This theory draws support from other controversial archaeological claims, such as the supposed discovery of Templar artifacts in various American locations, and the persistent legends of pre-Columbian European contact with the Americas. However, like the ancient mining theory, this explanation faces significant challenges in accounting for how such expeditions could have penetrated so far into the American interior using medieval technology, and without leaving more substantial evidence of their presence. The debate over these California discoveries became even more complex following Russell Burrows' claims about his Illinois cave system. Burrows described finding thousands of artifacts in his cave, many of which bore striking similarities to items reportedly discovered in California and other western states. The artifacts included stone tablets with hieroglyphic inscriptions, ceremonial objects, weapons, and artistic pieces that seemed to represent a blend of various Old World cultures. Burrows claimed that his cave system was enormous, containing multiple chambers and passages that extended deep underground. He described finding what appeared to be burial chambers containing sarcophagi and mummified remains, treasure rooms filled with gold and precious stones, and libraries of stone tablets covered with inscriptions in multiple ancient languages. The scale of the discovery, if genuine, would represent one of the most significant archaeological finds in American history. However, Burrows' refusal to reveal the exact location of his cave or allow independent archaeological investigation has made it impossible to verify his claims. He has cited concerns about grave robbing, government interference, and personal safety as reasons for maintaining secrecy about the cave's location. This secrecy has made Burrows' Cave one of the most controversial topics in American archaeology, with passionate defenders and equally passionate skeptics arguing over its authenticity. The connection between Burrows' Cave and the California discoveries lies not just in the similar types of artifacts reported, but also in the patterns of evidence and secrecy that surround both phenomena. Like many of the California cases, Burrows' Cave artifacts have been photographed and documented, but the physical items remain largely inaccessible to independent researchers. This pattern has led some skeptics to suggest that both phenomena represent elaborate hoaxes designed to promote books, lectures, or other commercial ventures. However, supporters of the discoveries point out that many of the California cases predate modern commercial motivations and occurred in an era when there was little financial incentive to create such hoaxes. They argue that the consistency of reports across different time periods and geographic locations suggests that something genuine underlies at least some of these discoveries, even if individual cases may be questionable. Modern scientific analysis has been applied to some artifacts claimed to be from California cave discoveries, with mixed results. In cases where physical artifacts have been available for testing, the results have generally been inconclusive. Some items have shown signs of artificial aging or other evidence of modern manufacture, while others have produced ambiguous results that could support either ancient or modern origins. The challenge of authentication is complicated by the fact that many of the reported California cave artifacts have disappeared from public view over the decades. This pattern could indicate either a cover-up designed to suppress evidence that challenges conventional history, or the natural tendency for questionable artifacts to vanish when subjected to scientific scrutiny. One intriguing aspect of the California cave mystery is its intersection with Native American oral traditions. Some tribes in California and the Southwest have legends that describe contact with people from across the ocean in ancient times. These stories sometimes include descriptions of bearded men with different customs and technologies who arrived by sea and established temporary settlements or trading relationships with indigenous peoples. While such oral traditions must be interpreted carefully, some researchers argue that they provide cultural context that supports the possibility of ancient Old World contact with California. The traditions suggest that at least some Native American groups would not have been entirely surprised by the presence of Old World artifacts in their territories, as their ancestral memories include accounts of such foreign visitors. The geological context of California also plays a role in evaluating these discoveries. The state's complex geology includes numerous cave systems formed by various processes over millions of years. Some of these caves are large enough to have served as storage sites or temporary shelters for any ancient visitors to the region. The state's seismic activity means that many caves that might have existed in ancient times could have been destroyed or rendered inaccessible by earthquakes and other geological changes. Climate change over the millennia could also have affected the preservation and accessibility of any ancient artifacts deposited in California caves. The state has experienced significant climate fluctuations over the past several thousand years, including periods of drought and flooding that could have affected cave systems and the artifacts they might contain. Modern exploration of California's cave systems continues to reveal new chambers and passages, some of which contain archaeological materials. While most of these discoveries consist of Native American artifacts or more recent historical items, the ongoing exploration demonstrates that significant cave systems remain incompletely documented throughout the state. The technological advances of recent decades have provided new tools for investigating claims of ancient artifacts in California caves. Ground-penetrating radar can detect underground chambers without physical excavation, while advanced dating techniques can more accurately determine the age of organic materials found in association with artifacts. However, the application of these technologies to investigating the cave artifact mystery has been limited by access issues and the controversial nature of the claims. The legal and ethical considerations surrounding cave archaeology in California are complex. Many caves are located on public lands managed by federal or state agencies, which have strict regulations governing archaeological investigation. Private landowners may be reluctant to allow extensive exploration of caves on their property due to liability concerns or personal beliefs about the significance of any discoveries. Native American tribes have legitimate interests in any archaeological discoveries made on or near their traditional territories. The Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act and other federal laws require consultation with tribal authorities for any investigation that might affect cultural resources. This adds an additional layer of complexity to investigating claims of ancient Old World artifacts in California, as such discoveries could have implications for understanding pre-contact Native American history. The commercial exploitation of archaeological discoveries is another factor that complicates the California cave artifact mystery. The potential value of genuinely ancient Old World artifacts creates strong incentives for both legitimate research and fraudulent activity. This economic dimension makes it even more difficult to separate authentic discoveries from manufactured controversies designed to generate profit through books, documentaries, or artifact sales. Despite decades of claims, investigations, and debates, the question of whether genuine Old World artifacts exist in California caves remains unresolved. The evidence consists largely of photographs, eyewitness accounts, and second-hand reports, with very few artifacts available for independent scientific analysis. This lack of physical evidence makes it impossible to reach definitive conclusions about the authenticity of the discoveries. However, the persistence and consistency of these reports across more than a century suggest that the phenomenon deserves continued serious investigation. Whether the artifacts represent genuine evidence of ancient contact between Old and New World civilizations, elaborate hoaxes, or misidentified natural phenomena, they raise important questions about American prehistory and the methods we use to investigate controversial archaeological claims. The story of California's cave artifacts ultimately reflects broader tensions in American archaeology between established academic consensus and claims that challenge conventional historical narratives. These tensions are likely to continue as new discoveries are made and new technologies become available for investigating controversial archaeological claims. Whether future research will vindicate the claims of ancient Old World presence in California or definitively expose them as elaborate deceptions remains to be seen. Along the rugged coastline of Northern California, where the Pacific Ocean crashes against towering cliffs and fog rolls in like a mysterious curtain, lies one of the most perplexing archaeological puzzles on the entire continent. Point Reyes, with its dramatic headlands and windswept beaches, has long been a place where the unexpected washes ashore, but nothing could have prepared researchers for what they would discover buried in the sand dunes of this remote peninsula. The story begins not with grand expeditions or planned excavations, but with something far more ordinary. Local beachcombers and hikers had been finding unusual pieces of wood along the shoreline for decades. At first, these weathered fragments seemed unremarkable, just another piece of driftwood in a landscape littered with the remnants of countless storms. But some of these pieces were different. They bore strange markings, unusual joints, and a craftsmanship that didn't quite match anything from the known maritime history of the region. It wasn't until the 1970s that archaeologists began to take a serious interest in these mysterious wooden fragments. What they discovered would challenge everything we thought we knew about who reached the shores of California first. Buried beneath layers of sand and sediment, they uncovered the remains of what appeared to be a ship. But this wasn't just any ship. This was something that, according to conventional history, shouldn't have existed where it was found. The vessel, or what remained of it, showed construction techniques that were completely foreign to European shipbuilding traditions of the era. The wood itself was not native to the California coast. Carbon dating revealed something even more startling. The ship appeared to be far older than any known European voyage to the Pacific coast of North America. Some estimates placed its age at several centuries before Columbus ever set sail across the Atlantic. But here's where the mystery deepens. The construction methods found in the Point Reyes wreck bore striking similarities to shipbuilding techniques used by ancient civilizations thousands of miles away. The way the planks were joined, the types of fastenings used, even the overall design philosophy seemed to echo maritime traditions from the far side of the Pacific Ocean. Some researchers noticed similarities to ancient Chinese junks, while others saw elements reminiscent of Polynesian voyaging vessels. The wood analysis revealed another puzzle. Spectroscopic testing showed that the timber came from tree species that don't grow anywhere near California. Some samples appeared to match wood types found in Southeast Asia, while others seemed consistent with timber from islands scattered across the Pacific. How did a ship built with such exotic materials end up buried in the sand dunes of Point Reyes? The official archaeological reports were carefully worded, acknowledging the unusual nature of the find while stopping short of making any definitive claims about its origins. But behind closed doors, researchers were grappling with implications that could rewrite the history of Pacific exploration. If this ship was indeed pre-Columbian, as the evidence seemed to suggest, then it meant that sophisticated ocean-going vessels were reaching the California coast centuries before any European had even conceived of sailing to the New World. Local Native American tribes had their own stories about the mysterious wreck. The Coast Miwok people, who had lived in the Point Reyes area for thousands of years, spoke of strange ships that occasionally appeared along their shores, vessels that looked nothing like the familiar boats of neighboring tribes. These oral traditions described encounters with foreign sailors, whose appearance and customs were completely unknown to them. For generations, these stories had been dismissed as folklore, but the discovery of the Point Reyes wreck gave them a new significance. One of the most intriguing aspects of the mystery is the location itself. Point Reyes juts out into the Pacific like a giant finger, creating one of the most prominent landmarks along the entire California coast. For any navigator approaching from the west, it would be nearly impossible to miss. Ancient mariners, whether by design or accident, would naturally be drawn to this protected area behind the headlands. The geography itself seems almost designed to capture wayward vessels from across the Pacific. But if ancient Asian or Polynesian mariners were indeed reaching California centuries before Columbus, where is the rest of the evidence? Shouldn't there be more wrecks, more artifacts, more signs of contact between these distant civilizations and the indigenous peoples of California? Some researchers believe the Point Reyes wreck might not be an isolated incident, but rather the only surviving evidence of what was once a more regular pattern of trans-Pacific contact. The mystery is complicated by the fact that much of the wreck has been lost to time and the elements. The California coast is notoriously harsh on wooden artifacts. The combination of salt spray, shifting sands, and periodic storms means that organic materials rarely survive for extended periods. What remains of the Point Reyes ship might represent only a tiny fraction of the original vessel, and countless other wrecks might have been completely destroyed by the relentless Pacific weather. Recent technological advances have opened new avenues for investigation. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed what appear to be additional wooden structures buried deeper in the sand dunes around Point Reyes. Some of these anomalies are much larger than the original wreck fragments, suggesting the possibility of multiple vessels, or perhaps parts of the same ship that have been scattered by centuries of storms and tidal action. DNA analysis of wood samples has provided tantalizing clues about the ship's origins. The genetic signatures found in the timber point to forest ecosystems that existed centuries ago in various parts of the Pacific Rim. But the results are frustratingly incomplete, unable to pinpoint exactly where the wood was harvested or when the trees were cut down. It's like having pieces of a puzzle without knowing what the complete picture is supposed to look like. The implications of the Point Reyes mystery extend far beyond archaeology. If pre-Columbian trans-Pacific contact was more common than previously believed, it could explain some of the cultural similarities that researchers have noted between ancient American civilizations and their Asian counterparts. Certain agricultural techniques, artistic styles, and even mythological themes seem to echo across the Pacific in ways that have long puzzled scholars. Some researchers have suggested that the Point Reyes ship might be connected to the legendary Chinese treasure fleets of Admiral Zheng He, who led massive expeditions across the Indian Ocean in the early 15th century. Official Chinese records claim these fleets never ventured beyond Southeast Asia, but some historians believe they may have traveled much farther than documented. Could one of these vessels have somehow made it all the way to California? Others point to the remarkable navigational skills of Polynesian sailors, who successfully colonized islands scattered across thousands of miles of open ocean using nothing but traditional sailing techniques and celestial navigation. If Polynesian voyagers could reach Easter Island, which lies just over 2,000 miles from the South American coast, might they have also reached North America? The mystery deepens when you consider the seasonal wind and current patterns of the North Pacific. During certain times of the year, the prevailing currents and trade winds create a natural highway that could carry vessels from Asia directly to the California coast. Ancient mariners who understood these patterns might have been able to make the journey with relative ease, at least compared to fighting against the elements. But perhaps the most intriguing possibility is that the Point Reyes wreck represents something else entirely, evidence of a maritime civilization that we have yet to identify. The construction techniques found in the ship don't perfectly match any known tradition, leading some researchers to speculate that it might be the product of a culture that has since vanished from history. The Pacific Ocean, after all, has witnessed dramatic changes over the past millennium. Sea levels have fluctuated, entire islands have appeared and disappeared, and countless civilizations have risen and fallen along its shores. The Point Reyes mystery remains unsolved, a puzzle that continues to challenge our understanding of ancient navigation and Pacific exploration. Every few years, New fragments wash ashore or emerge from the shifting sands, each piece adding to the enigma rather than solving it. The ship that shouldn't exist continues to exist, a ghostly reminder that the Pacific Ocean still holds secrets that we're only beginning to understand. What makes this mystery particularly compelling is its location in California, a place we think we know so well. The idea that ancient mariners from across the Pacific might have been exploring these shores centuries before European contact forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the history of the American West. The Point Reyes wreck is more than just an archaeological puzzle. It's a window into a past that might be far more complex and interconnected than we ever imagined. In the heart of one of Earth's most desolate landscapes, where summer temperatures can reach 130 degrees Fahrenheit and rainfall is measured in fractions of inches per year, lies one of the most perplexing natural mysteries ever documented. Death Valley, California, stretches across the desert like an ancient sea floor, its flat expanse broken only by distant mountains that shimmer in the relentless heat. But it's not the extreme temperatures or the harsh environment that draws researchers to this remote corner of the Mojave Desert. It's the rocks that move by themselves. The mystery centers on a place called Racetrack Playa, a perfectly flat dry lake bed that stretches for miles without a single tree, bush, or significant rock formation to break the monotony. At first glance, it seems like one of the most lifeless places on Earth. But scattered across this barren landscape are hundreds of large stones, some weighing several hundred pounds, each trailing behind it a perfectly straight line carved into the hard-packed earth. These trails, some stretching for hundreds of yards, look exactly like what you would expect to see if someone had dragged the rocks across the playa with invisible ropes. The sailing stones of Death Valley were first documented by miners in the early 1900s, but it wasn't until the 1940s that scientists began to take serious notice. The phenomenon seemed to defy basic physics. The rocks, some as large as refrigerators, appeared to move across the desert floor under their own power, leaving behind unmistakable evidence of their journeys. But here's the thing that made it truly mysterious. No one had ever actually seen them move. For decades, researchers set up cameras, motion detectors, and other monitoring equipment around the playa, hoping to catch the stones in the act. They watched and waited through scorching summers and freezing winters, but the rocks remained stubbornly stationary. Yet every few years, visitors would return to find that the stones had moved again, sometimes just a few feet, sometimes hundreds of yards, always leaving behind those perfectly straight tracks in the hard-pan surface. The trails themselves were as puzzling as the movement. Some were perfectly straight, as if the rocks had been pulled by an invisible thread. Others curved gracefully across the playa, suggesting that whatever was moving them could change direction. Most mysteriously, parallel tracks showed that multiple stones sometimes moved together, following identical paths across the desert as if they were part of some coordinated migration. Early theories about the sailing stones ranged from the scientific to the supernatural. Some researchers suggested that strong desert winds might be powerful enough to push the rocks across the smooth surface, especially if the playa became slippery after rare rainstorms. But wind measurements showed that even the strongest gusts recorded in Death Valley weren't nearly powerful enough to move stones weighing hundreds of pounds. Besides, if wind were the culprit, why were the tracks always so straight and purposeful? Others proposed that underground magnetic fields might be responsible, somehow creating forces that could drag iron-rich rocks across the desert. This theory gained some support when researchers discovered that many of the moving stones contained significant amounts of iron ore. But magnetic field measurements around the playa showed nothing unusual, certainly nothing strong enough to overcome the friction of several hundred pounds of rock against the ground. The earthquake theory suggested that seismic activity might cause the stones to slide during tremors, but seismographs placed around Death Valley detected no correlation between Earth movement and rock migration. Besides, earthquakes would be more likely to cause random, chaotic movement rather than the straight, purposeful tracks that characterize the sailing stones. One of the most persistent theories involved flash flooding. Death Valley does occasionally experience sudden, violent rainstorms that can temporarily turn the dry playa into a shallow lake. Some researchers theorize that floating ice sheets might form during cold winter nights, and that these ice flows could somehow push the rocks around as they moved across the water's surface. But this explanation had problems too. The tracks often showed no evidence of water damage, and ice formation in Death Valley, while not impossible, was extremely rare and short-lived. The mystery deepened when researchers began to study the stones themselves. Many were dolomite rocks that had broken off from a formation at the south end of the playa, but others seemed to have arrived from much farther away. Some stones appeared to be granite, limestone, or other rock types that didn't match any nearby geological formations. How had these foreign rocks ended up in the middle of Death Valley in the first place? Detailed mapping of the trails revealed patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Some tracks ran parallel to each other for hundreds of yards, as if multiple stones had moved as a group. Others converged and diverged like a complex highway system. A few tracks even showed evidence of rocks that had moved, stopped for extended periods, then moved again in completely different directions. The patterns were so intricate that some observers half-seriously suggested the stones might be following some kind of ancient migration route. The sailing stones became famous not just for their mystery, but for their apparent intelligence. The tracks showed evidence of rocks navigating around obstacles, changing direction to avoid collisions with other stones, and even seeming to follow established pathways across the playa. Some stones appeared to move in formation, maintaining consistent spacing as they traveled parallel courses across the desert. Others seemed to exhibit what could only be described as coordinated behavior, with multiple rocks beginning and ending their journeys at roughly the same locations. Advanced technology brought new tools to the investigation. Satellite imagery allowed researchers to track changes in stone positions over months and years, revealing movement patterns that weren't visible to ground-based observers. GPS devices attached to individual stones provided precise measurements of their locations, but frustratingly, the rocks remained motionless whenever monitoring equipment was in place. It was as if they knew they were being watched. Time-lapse photography captured thousands of hours of footage showing the playa under various weather conditions. The cameras recorded storms, temperature fluctuations, and seasonal changes, but never once showed a stone actually moving. Yet when researchers reviewed the positions of the rocks after each recording session, they would inevitably find that some had shifted, apparently moving during the brief periods when equipment was being serviced or during rare technical malfunctions. The breakthrough came in 2014, when a team of researchers finally captured the sailing stones in motion. But what they discovered was more surprising than anyone had expected. The movement occurred during a very specific set of conditions that happened only rarely in Death Valley. On cold winter mornings after rare rainstorms, thin sheets of ice would form on the shallow pools of water that temporarily covered the playa. As the sun rose and temperatures increased, these ice sheets would begin to break up and move, pushed by gentle breezes that were nowhere near strong enough to move the rocks directly. But here's the key insight that had eluded researchers for decades. The moving ice sheets created a floating platform that dramatically reduced the friction between the stones and the ground. Rocks that would normally require tremendous force to move became almost weightless, able to glide across the wet playa surface pushed by the most gentle of breezes. The ice acted like a natural conveyor belt, carrying the stones along as it drifted across the temporary lake. This explanation solved many aspects of the mystery. The straight tracks were created when ice sheets moved in consistent directions across the playa. The parallel tracks occurred when multiple stones were carried along by the same sheet of ice. The apparently coordinated movement was simply the result of rocks being pushed by the same natural forces at the same time. But even with this breakthrough, questions remain. The ice sheet theory explains how the stones move, but it doesn't account for all the observed phenomena. Some tracks show evidence of movement during periods when no ice formation was possible. Others suggest that rocks moved uphill against the natural flow of water and ice across the playa. A few stones appear to have moved multiple times in different directions, creating complex overlapping track patterns that would require multiple ice sheet events with different directional flows. The sailing stones of Death Valley remind us that nature still holds mysteries that can perplex even our most advanced scientific instruments. For over a century, these wandering rocks captured imaginations and challenged our understanding of physics, geology, and meteorology. Even now, with a plausible explanation for their movement, they continue to surprise researchers with new behaviors and patterns that don't quite fit the established theory. Perhaps what's most remarkable about the sailing stones is how they demonstrate the power of patient observation and scientific persistence. The mystery wasn't solved by a single dramatic discovery, but by decades of careful documentation, measurement, and analysis. Each research expedition added pieces to the puzzle, gradually building toward an understanding of this extraordinary phenomenon. The Death Valley sailing stones serve as a reminder that our planet still holds secrets, that even in places we think we understand completely, nature can surprise us with phenomena that challenge our assumptions about how the world works. In an age when we can map distant galaxies and sequence DNA, it's somehow comforting to know that there are still mysteries right here on Earth, still rocks that dance across the desert when no one is watching, still questions waiting to be answered in the vast, patient landscape of Death Valley. The past is filled with mysteries, some buried in California's deserts, some hidden deep within its mountains, and others hiding in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered. The stories we explored today are just a glimpse into the strange, the forgotten, and the unexplained layers of history that still defy answers. But the more we uncover, the more questions emerge. If you enjoyed this journey into California's ancient mysteries, be sure to subscribe and check out our other deep dives into the unknown.